First and foremost, we got Sherrod Koval. He tore his ACL. He's not going to be back until the fall. Jaden Lucas had right hip surgery, won't be back until the fall. Unfortunately, he spent a ton of time injured. Really hope he can kind of put it together and be healthy, because he's a heck of a cornerback when healthy. Walker Parks, he will be back in some semblance this spring. Could be just for individual drills. Probably won't be a full go on contact or anything like that. But he's not going to get he's going to get some work this spring. He's going to get some sort of individual drills. Probably a lot of mental reps, things like that. But we know what Walker Parks can do on the field. We really just need him to get healthy and stay healthy for an entire season, because the dude is an animal when he's on the field, and we miss him every time he's injured and off the field. That's been very evident over the past 2 seasons, well documented. Watson Young, ACL tear, won't be back until the fall. Armand Mason, he's got a stress fracture, so he's going to be completely out while he heals that up. Tyler Brown got that foot injury, right? So he's going to get some work in the spring, but will that turn into any live work? My guess is probably not. Maybe he'll get some individual work, some position drills work with the DBs, but I'm assuming they probably keep him out of contact for the entire spring. But again, I don't know. There's a possibility he could be back later on in spring as a full go. And then Corian Gibson, obviously he tore his ACL, had that surgery. He's going to work in spring, but Dabo made it clear that he will not have any live work this spring. So he'll probably run routes on air, maybe run routes against some DBs, but no contact drills, no live work. So at least he'll get some kind of work. Jay Haynes working back from a hamstring, apparently. I didn't know he had an injury. Apparently it's nothing serious. It's nothing that's going to affect him long term. He'll be back this spring at some point in time. He didn't really give a well thought out timeline for Jay Haynes, but that's a guy we need to see on the field this spring. He's going to be in a battle in that running back room to get carries and solidify a spot in there. So hopefully that hamstring heals up pretty quickly. Noble Johnson, he's going to be out for the entire spring. Ronan O'Connell, he's going to be limited this spring, but he will get some work. Brandon Strozier, limited this spring as well. And then Vic Burley and Ronan Hannafin working back pretty well. Not fully cleared yet, but they're going to get work this spring. Probably be back within the next week or so as a full go participants this spring. So like I said before, pretty lengthy list. Some names that we definitely expected to hear because we already knew about their injuries, but some other ones that we didn't know about that are fresh faces or new names that we didn't know were injured or didn't know would be limited this spring. What are your thoughts? Does this affect the Clemson roster in any way? Were you surprised to hear any of these names, and will they have any lasting effects?
Yeah. When I look at the list in its entirety, it's not the end of the world. There are some individual position groups where I'm like, oh man, I kind of wish you had them. I think defensive backs, the defensive back room, I think that kind of sucks not to have, Sherrod Koval, a guy that, I was really high on coming out of high school. He's kind of been buried in that safety room. Clemson's had, has been pretty fortunate at retaining and having, multi-year starters there. So it's kind of been tough for him to get on the field. Sherrod Koval, Corian Gibson, the true freshman corner coming in. Obviously we knew about his injury, and so we knew that was going to be a rough. It was not likely he would be able to be a go for spring. But I'm still, I'm really high on him. He has a lot of scheme versatility. He can run. He's one of the fastest defensive backs in his class. So it sucks not to have him. I think the biggest thing is because you have such a young defensive back room now, and you have a lot of young players that are going to be stepping up. We've talked at length about Avion Terrell and Shelton Lewis, Kylan Griffin, guys like that, Khalil Barnes. And so you kind of want to have those guys in there competing with each other, and having a guy like Corian Gibson in the room, really talented freshman to push as well. That can only help. And then, Jaden Lucas, it sucks again, because he's been a guy that struggled with injuries for a long time. And he's going to be one of your more veteran corners this year. And so, hopefully you want him to step into a bigger role as well. And so it sucks that he'll be limited. So I think of all the position groups, I think the one that jumped out to me was the defensive back room, just because you're going to have a lot of the youth this year. And, it would be nice to have those guys, have all those guys together. Not having Tyler Brown, that kind of sucks. Full go, that kind of, you want him to be able to continue to build that rapport with Cade, because he's a guy that you're going to be relying on. But the wide receiver room in general, you have a lot of, you have most of the guys that you expect to rely on are there. Obviously, we know what's the situation with Noble Johnson, but you've got Adam Randall is fully healthy, as we'll talk about. Antonio Williams, guy that just had a horrible rash of luck with injuries last year.
Yeah.
We know what he can do when he's healthy. Troy Stellato. So you have Cole Turner coming back. That's big. You have I think the core of guys that I think this staff is expecting to rely on, for the most part, is intact. You just wish you had Tyler Brown there as well, because he's as good as any of them. And obviously not having Walker Parks sucks too, especially with a lot of having a new offensive line coach and he's trying to figure out what he has in this group and who he's expecting to rely on and who's going to play where. So not having probably arguably your best guy kind of sucks, but it does give a chance for you to build some depth behind him. That's always the upside is, you take a starter out of the equation, that's more reps for some of the younger guys. And there are a lot of guys on this roster that we've kind of been waiting on. There's a lot of talented pieces on this roster that we've been waiting on to kind of emerge, and it kind of opens the door for some of those guys. We've talked about it. Not just the older guys, but some of the true freshmen as well. So it'll be good. It'll be cool to see. Elijah Thurman is a guy that they've been really, really high on and been talking about. So, and a guy that maybe could potentially factor into the center position battle, at least maybe to some degree. It's kind of a double-edged sword there. But all in all, I think this injury list isn't nearly as bad as it was last year, and so I think that's the bright side.
Yeah, absolutely. It's not as deep or as long as it was last year for certain, and I don't think it affects us quite as much. You heard Dabo talk in his interview about having, I think he said, one scholarship player at the wide receiver position for last spring, which is crazy when you think about it. Horrible, absolutely ridiculous. Like, how do you build any continuity? How do you learn each other's tendencies and get some chemistry and all that stuff that's so important when it comes to quarterback and wide receiver. So as much as it sucks that Tyler Brown's going to be out for a portion of spring, he will be back. He will get work this spring. So it's not like he's not going to do anything this spring, but initially he's going to be limited, and he's probably going to be somewhat limited throughout all of spring. Do they let him go full go for the spring game? I don't know. I guess that'll depend on the medical staff and how they feel that foot's doing. And really, I think it'll depend on, I guess the risk of re-injury at that point in time. I don't think if there's risk for re-injury, I don't think you let him play in a spring game, right? Like he's too important of a player. We know what he can do on the field. We don't necessarily need to see him do it in a spring game. But it would be nice to get him some work with Cade, which I think will happen in spring. And that's one of the things that Dabo talked about, that what you mentioned earlier at the top of the show, that explosive, what did he call it?
Explosive chemistry was
there we go. Yeah. Explosive chemistry. And that's really what this offense needs to hone in this year. We have to become more explosive as an offense, and it's going to start with reps this spring. And thankfully, we have pretty much a full slate of wide receivers to work with this spring. I think it's going to be super important. Like I said, I don't think there's any injury here that really is that detrimental. I agree with your take on the DB room, right? Those two injuries kind of hurt a little bit, especially the Jaden Lucas, Sherrod Cole. You hate it for him because
Yeah.
I think he has the ability to crack that rotation if he could just stay healthy. Because we've seen him on the field before when healthy, and the dude can play. I mean, he can flat out play. So he could definitely be a contributor this year. He's just got to stay healthy. Got to get that ACL better. You know, some dudes bounce back from that a lot quicker than others. It's really hit or miss with guys. It's really on a case-by-case basis. So we'll see how he progresses, but he's not going to get any work this spring. That's for certain. But that's kind of it for the the injuries. I think Vic Burley, hopefully he's back in short order. Along with Ronan Hannafin. Those dudes seem to be those two will probably be back the soonest out of all the ones we mentioned. And we need Vic Burley this year, man. He would have played last year. I think he's going to be a guy that can absolutely contribute this year, mainly because of something we'll talk about a little bit later in the show. A couple guys moving to defensive end. So Vic Burley's going to have a little bit more opportunity at that defensive tackle position to really contribute to this Clemson Tiger team. So, I'm glad that the list is as short as it is. It does seem longer than I thought it would be, but again, it's always like that this time of year. You know, guys go in and get a scope of their knee or their ankle, get stuff cleaned up. They want to get guys fully healthy for fall camp, so it makes a lot of sense. But for the most part, I think this is as healthy as Clemson's been in quite a few seasons heading into spring practice. So that's a good thing because we need it. Dabo laid out all the things that this Clemson team needs to improve in 2024. So, here we are. Day 2 of spring is in the books. Still a lot of work to do. But it's really just time to get to work and see what this Clemson team can do for this spring.
Yeah, absolutely. And to those guys that are injured, only thing we can hope is speedy recovery for all of them. Injuries suck. That's unfortunately part of the game. But I still feel okay with where Clemson is from a roster standpoint and availability standpoint. A lot better than I did last year. That's for sure. So we'll see how it goes, and we'll next week there'll be a lot of stuff as they get into the full meat and potatoes of what they're install and all the stuff they're going to be entered. I don't know if they have a scrimmage next week. They might.
I think they do. Yeah, I think they have a scrimmage towards the end of next week.
Yeah. So, and we'll talk about some of that as well. And but yeah. Let's pray for no more injuries.
Yeah, no new injuries. Hopefully we don't have a new injury segment next week when we do this show.